I'm Corey Johnson, in for Emily Chang, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Well, coming up, AT&T pushes to clinch a deal for Time Warner by Monday, trying to front-run other bidders. We're going to explain why the telecom giant is in such a rush. Plus, another deal we're watching, Qualcomm's blockbuster $40 billion takeover NXP could also come next week. We're going to see if the deal makes sense for both sides and the market for consumer drones aiming for the skies. We're going to hear from China's consumer drone giant DJI up ahead. But first, a handful of possible deals on the radar this Friday. First up, Qualcomm and NXP, the two chip makers, wrapping up what could be the largest transaction in the history of the semiconductor industry. It's a mega cap deal that would cap a wave of consolidation in that sector. We're also watching takeover talk between AT&T and Time Warner. People familiar with the matter tell us that the carrier is pushing to seal this deal by Monday. And finally, an enterprise software company said to be valued at over $10 billion. We're going to talk about Infor in just a moment. But first, let's kick this off with Qualcomm NXP. Bloomberg's Brooke Sutherland writes about M&A for Gadfly. It's our instant commentary section of the Bloomberg. She's in New York with the latest. This is an amazing deal here, a big change for AT&T. What do you think they see in this, Brooke?
Well, you know, I think the industry in general has been moving toward this sort of combination of distribution and content. We saw Comcast as sort of the first mover with its deal for NBC Universal and then later for DreamWorks. And I think AT&T is just sort of following in its footsteps there. And this is where the industry in general is moving right now.
It is interesting. I mean, we also, of course, had the Verizon results this week, and Verizon with AOL and their maybe acquisition of Yahoo, likely acquisition of Yahoo, I'll call it. Is this about a slowdown in growth in wireless and looking for other venues, or is it something that's going to integrate in a certain way?
You know, I think it's a little bit of both. I think that, you know, what we've seen is that people are willing to pay for content, even if they're not willing to pay for cable. You know, HBO Go has gotten good traction. People pay for Netflix. So content is really key, and it's important for reaching out to that wire-cutting generation that maybe doesn't want to pay their cable bill every month.
And then, of course, you know, we've got these mergers happening in the media telecom space. But then this semiconductor business is really amazing. We've seen so much activity in this sector. But NXP, Qualcomm, very different businesses, it seems to me.
It is, and I mean, that's sort of the point, is that Qualcomm's really looking to diversify here. They want to move away from the smartphone market where shipments are stalling. They're facing a lot more competition as handset makers are bringing a lot of this production in-house. And so NXP is much more diverse. They're really a big player in the automotive market, which is seen as a growth area going forward for semiconductor makers. And so the idea is to diversify. You know, the question is whether it's too much diversification, and if Qualcomm's going to get in over its head here. I mean, it's going to be a massive integration effort of a company that's already in the process of integrating a deal. I remember we haven't even passed the one-year anniversary of NXP's acquisition of Freescale, and that was almost a $17 billion deal. So, yeah. I mean, this is going to be a very, very big undertaking for Qualcomm.
Well, and indeed, that's what really got them in substantially into the automotive business, which, you know, is still a payment business, still an important thing for them. And finally, let's get to Infor. I sort of mentioned this. What is Infor?
It's a software company. I mean, the most interesting thing about this deal is the size of it, which you mentioned, you know, sort of in your intro, over $10 billion. We haven't seen very many private equity deals of this size since the financial crisis. They've just been very difficult to get done with the financing environment, and, you know, companies have sort of moved away from the club deals that were the hallmark of 2008, and something this big is very difficult to do just for one private equity firm. So I thought it was very interesting in the Bloomberg story to see that the companies are actually talking about maybe doing a club deal again, which is going to be a very interesting phenomenon if we start seeing those coming back.
There's a lot of deep pockets looking to do deals, so I would imagine it's probably possible. Bloomberg News deals reporter Brooke Sutherland. Thank you very much. All right, well, hackers temporarily shut down access to a lot of websites across the internet around the world on Friday, primarily in the U.S. The issue appears to be with domain name service hosts, in particular a company called Dyn. Dyn reported the first attack around 7 a.m. New York time this morning, left millions of people without access to Twitter. Good Lord, imagine no access to Twitter and Spotify and the New York Times, among other sites. Well, two other waves of attacks followed later in the day. Joining us now to discuss what happened and why, Brian White, COO of Red Owl Analytics. Always good to see you. So what happened here?
Yeah, there was a massive distributed denial of service attack, and it targeted
DNS attack,
against the DNS, which Dyn hosted. And so essentially, what's happening, to put this into layman's terms, is somebody went after the post office, and the post office didn't know where to send packages, and that's what essentially happened here. And why this is concerning is it went at the fundamental infrastructure, which connects people to sites like Twitter and Spotify, et cetera.
And so, why would someone possibly want to do this? Like, what could the motivation be? I mean, the phishing attacks and all that stuff, I get that. Shutting down lots of websites, is this some crazy kid in an Estonian basement somewhere? Or?
Yeah, first, let's segment what happened, right? They took advantage, they used a botnet. So they took many computers together, and what they're taking advantage of increasingly are all the internet-connected devices. These are our webcams, these are all the internet-connected devices we have. And so they have unprecedented scale to start to launch these types of attacks. The second, in terms of why they may do it, that's unknown. There's a couple of different ideas out there, and I think there are two that are worth mentioning. One...
I hope these are the weird ones.
No, one is weird. The one first is that there was some research that was done and released yesterday, and they thought maybe this may be retaliation. The problem with that is it's hard to launch this sophisticated of an effort that quickly.
And what was the research about?
It was about the proliferation of these types of attacks, what else needs to be done, and making people aware of the issue. And there's Brian Krebs, who, as we know, is a well-known cyber journalist, was impacted by these when he published some of this research about 2 weeks ago. And then the second idea, which I think is probably the more concerning, and you'll appreciate it, is are people now probing the fundamental layer of the infrastructure? And they're thinking about, what is really interconnected, and how, if I target Dyn, what else can I do? And are they probing our systems to really understand just how interconnected we are?
Because that could be a state-backed hack, so they want to sort of see how the internet works so they can try to attack it in a time of war.
Yeah, because it's difficult to know. Like, we didn't know until today that Twitter and Spotify gave all their business to Dyn. That we've disclosed today. Some may know that. There's only a few of them that do that type of service, but now they know that, so they gain some insight. I don't know if that's really real, but if you want a conspiracy theory, that's as close as I'll go with you.
I want a conspiracy theory. You know me well. These kinds of state-sponsored attacks start to get interesting, and there's some history here of a couple of countries, Russia, North Korea, China, the U.S., Israel, right? All countries that have used cyber attacks to achieve certain goals at certain times of conflict.
Exactly, and I think what we're seeing now, and particularly in the election season, obviously Russia is front and center. Who would have imagined that we'd have this much coverage about what Russia is doing and their potential relationship with WikiLeaks and the disclosure of the emails. But the reality is that there's quite a bit of capability out there, and we don't know exactly what everybody is doing. And the reality also is that we need more redundancy in the capability. And so I think inevitably you're going to ask, what else needs to be done to avoid these problems going forward? And I think it's a combination, as usual, of many things. It's more redundancy, it's more testing, it's probably better technology, and it's more communication to ensure that we know when something like this happens, we can quickly get back up and running. And I think that was the concern this morning.
It's also interesting to see the businesses affected. I talked to one entrepreneur this morning who told me her business, which runs online, was completely knocked out. It's a startup. It's because they're such a young business, they don't have the redundancy that larger businesses you would think would have, but apparently Spotify and Twitter didn't have that either. Could this lead to businesses, which are substantially internet businesses, having sort of dual publishing methodology or dual capabilities on the internet so that they are not so dependent on any one vulnerable source?
No, I think what they may do is they may go to more and more providers like Dyn to give them more redundancy, which many of them do already. But this is the path that we're already in. We're so reliant on this. I mean, GitHub was also impacted, and we use GitHub, as many software companies do. So a lot of people were impacted by this that you wouldn't normally think about, and that's not going to change the way that we develop software, the way that we interact, the way that people shop. They're all reliant on this system.
Interesting stuff. All right, Brian White, good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian White, COO of Red Owl Analytics. Well, coming up, Nintendo announcing the launch of its latest gaming console. We're talking to one of the developers working with the gaming giant on what we can look forward to next. And later, we're going to look to the skies. The world's largest maker of consumer drones, DJI. And we're talking their Mavic Pro, a new competition for GoPro and others, and their research plans in Silicon Valley. This is Bloomberg. One stock we're watching, Microsoft. Shares soaring to a record high on Friday, finally getting past the number set in 1999. The software giant reportedly a reasonably strong first quarter sales and earnings, fiscal first quarter, particularly in their cloud business. Shares surging 5.6%, breezing past the price hit right at the height of the dot-com bubble back in '99. A rally spurred on by enthusiasm, particularly for its Azure cloud business. Well, Nintendo is switching things up, trying to regain a foothold in the gaming console market. The company unveiled its long-awaited device, the Nintendo Switch. Will let gamers play at home and on the go. The gaming giant reaching out to third-party developers to bolster its game offerings. One of those developers, Unity Technologies, a San Francisco-based game development platform, creates software for some of the top games, including blockbuster hit Pokemon Go. But will this be enough to help Nintendo and others? Let's talk about Unity with Unity's CEO, John Riccitiello. John, great to see you.
Great to see you.
Describe what Unity does first, if you would.
So Unity does a couple of things, but at its core, we build a set of technologies that make it super easy to build games, whether those games be for PlayStations or Xboxes, Nintendo platforms, or for iOS or Android, Apple and Google platforms. So think of it this way. If you were going to try to build a game for all of those different platforms, it might take you 50 people to build one, and then 40, then 30, 30, 30, 30.
Which all the big game houses are doing. Activision, the Electronic Arts, they've got all these different teams that try to write the same game for different platforms.
Right, that's what they've been doing historically. And if you write it in Unity, first off, there's so much that's there in our code base that instead of those 50 people for the first application, you could probably build it with 20. So you can do it cheaper, better, faster. And the second thing we enable you to do is essentially hit a button, hit return, and you capture all the platforms. Write once, deploy to all the platforms. So we're a content enabler. We think of ourselves as super advanced paintbrushes for content builders. You make better stuff faster and cheaper with Unity.
There was once hope for as object-oriented programming, right, where you just essentially have a bunch of complete blocks of programming and just kind of stack them together and have your program written already. Is that part of the notion here?
Well, that's a metaphor, but I'm not sure it's the perfect metaphor for what we're doing. I would say if you're looking for a metaphor, instead of writing a game,
I usually am.
If you're trying to write a game, you're going to pick a programming language appropriate for the platform, and so you're going to start basically with a lot of letters and text and syntax. It looks like programming. In the case of Unity, you basically draw the game. You draw the car, you draw the racetrack, and then you use scripting to sort of connect the car to the racetrack. And because you've built the game as opposed to written the game, we can compile the code on any of these platforms. So you basically create once, deploy to all the platforms. Saves time, money, and energy for developers, which is why, by way of example, in the month of September, 9 of the top 20 games on mobile were built in Unity, or why over half the games in the world today are built in third-party engines like this, and why about a third of the games built in the world, a third of all games built in the world are built in Unity, or why about 70% of all AR and VR today is built in Unity. It's better, faster, cheaper to get there.
I want to kind of run through what's going on in the world of gaming right now. Now, you mentioned, or I mentioned Nintendo just briefly. They've got this new gaming device, right back to their original roots of sort of the handheld gaming. Your take?
Well, I mean, first off, if you take a look at Nintendo, and this is why we live to enable content creators like Nintendo. And Nintendo's created some of the most incredible intellectual property in history.
Right.
And one of the things we're proud to have helped power is the Pokemon Go franchise that Niantic realized recently and launched, built on Unity, super successful. And at the recent Apple event, they announced Mario. And to be honest with you, I think the world's been waiting for this. It's going to be a gigantic hit. In terms of their new Switch platform, of course, I've seen it. I've seen the releases. We are working with them. I'm sort of in an NDA situation to say more than I actually know about it because we are partners in Nintendo. So this is one of the things I tell you. Nintendo surprises you every time. They're innovative, they're different, and at times when they nail something, they hit the ball out of the park, and that's what I'm hoping for.
So Sony VR is out. Oculus has gotten maybe more attention than Sony VR, but it looks to me like Sony VR is in a much better position because they've got so many machines out there. What do you see happening on the content side in terms of development? Is anyone starting to do really big games? Big games, I mean immersive games that take hours and hours to play, not 15-minute sort of drive-by experiences?
Well, that's a long question, but I'll tell you, it's such early innings in the industry. I think of where we are in VR as sort of the pre-launch era, the tape and bandage perspective. What I mean by that is Oculus and the guys at Vive, up at Valve, and what Sony have done is so incredibly innovative. And if you've seen these things at their best, it's a transformative experience. So that long-term notion that we're going going to be living in VR, living in AR. I believe in that. This
Really?
$100 billion notion 5, 7, 10 years out, I believe that'll happen. And I've seen some of the best experiences. And for your readers or your watchers in New York, go into the Void at the Madame Tussauds and try the Ghostbusters experience. You're not tethered to a chair. It's mobile. You're running around. You are blasting ghosts. It's incredibly fun. It is tomorrow, that kind of location-based entertainment. So, right now, to try to handicap, Sony versus Oculus versus Vive versus all the many others that have come, seems to me a little bit like wasted energy. Remember, it was Nokia versus Ericsson versus Motorola for the smartphone stakes back in 2000, 2002, 2004.
Well, Palm, don't forget the winner.
Oh, no.
They were the ultimate winner, weren't they?
I had a trio, so I know. These things were all there. And by the way, I believe that Sony's going to be one of the winners, and Facebook and Oculus are going to be one of the winners, and the guys at Valve are incredibly innovative. But my point is, trying to handicap this now is sort of like, I don't know, that we're talking about carburetors and cubic inches of engines in cars, as opposed to the experience that comes out of the back end. Remember just 7 years ago, we were talking about the power of the CPU in your phone.
Right.
Now we're talking about what you get out of it, the experience you get with the new iPhone 7, or all the other Android devices that are doing so incredibly well. My point of it is this. It's going to be gigantic. We're such early stages, is that we're measuring the winner of a marathon on the basis of the first 50 feet of the race. We know it's going to be glorious, but trying to handicap one versus another seems wrong.
But you see the development happening big time in terms of new games.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of development that's being done in Unity right now, we see a lot. I've never seen anything like this. I remember when Sony launched the PlayStation. I've been in the game industry a while. And when that came out, disc-based, it was a spectacular transformation in the industry. And the number of people that entered the industry, that are still in the industry, it changed everything for console.
Right.
And I believe we are at that point right now. I believe it's believable, seriously, that VR and AR are going to be bigger than the gaming industry in total by a very wide margin, because it will encompass both gaming and lots of other things, whether it's travel, or I've seen some technologies that allow me to talk to you as if you're in the room with me when we're not. And that
it's like watching TV. John
it's better than that.
John Rictello, Unity Technology CEO. Really good to see you. Appreciate you coming by.
Thanks, Corey.
All right, we'll be right back on Bloomberg Technology. Bloomberg Studio 1.0 returns this week with Season 5 of extended conversations with some of the biggest influencers shaping media and technology, including Former Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer and venture capitalist Vinod Khosla. Emily Chang kicks off the season this Sunday with Instagram CEO Kevin Systrom. And a look at the Facebook headquarters in Menlo Park. 4 years ago, Facebook offered $1 billion for the service, or about $1 billion. And CEO Mark Zuckerberg pledged to let the Instagram team work independently. Emily started by asking whether Zuckerberg has lived up to that promise.
Mark has been true to his word and then some. Still to this day, Mark's interaction with the company basically is through meetings with me. And I've learned a tremendous amount from him about our transition to advertising, about our transition to a more global community, about strategy. He's one of the most interesting strategic, long-term strategic thinkers I've ever met. Think of it like having the best board member in the world. I mean, imagine how many companies would love to have Mark Zuckerberg on their board. That's what we get, and it's independent, but also you get amazing guidance and amazing counsel from someone who's been able to build a tremendous company.
How open has he been to your ideas? I mean, do you think he's learned anything from you?
I'd love to ask him that. No, I think for sure. What he quotes sometimes is that Instagram's focus on community and craft was, I think, fairly different than a lot of tech companies at the time. And, Facebook has this ship love mantra on the inside. And I think a lot of that came from Instagram's focus on the consumer and focus on making our community great. So I'd like to think that we influenced Facebook, but it's kind of hard to say that for sure. We'd have to ask him.
What have you learned from him?
Some of the things I talked about before about strategy and understanding your place in the ecosystem. I think, our transition to advertising was an interesting one. I was of the belief that if we had fewer advertisers, they'd be higher quality, and it actually turned out to be the opposite. If you have more advertisers and you're able to bring in an entire ecosystem where they compete against each other in an auction, you actually get higher quality advertisements. That's something that I didn't realize at the time. And I remember him saying, I felt the exact same way when we introduced advertising, and it turns out there's this other thing. I was able to learn a lot from him there.
You mentioned you meet with not just Mark, but also Jan and Brendan.
Yeah.
How do you see Instagram taking advantage of some of the more futuristic things that Facebook is working on, like virtual reality?
Well, if our vision is to make you feel like you can travel anywhere in the world in a fraction of a second and experience whatever's happening in the world, imagine a day when you can put on a headset and be at a Coldplay concert, seeing something happen like a big protest or a big riot anywhere in the world, or something as simple as a friend's wedding. That's the kind of experience we'd love to create, and I think virtual reality in the coming years will play a critical role in seeing that vision come true.
How about artificial intelligence?
Well, we use it today. I mean, it's what powers advertising and making sure that we have the right amount of targeting.
Do you see more of it in the future?
Oh, for sure. I mean, one thing I've learned through the history of Instagram is that the more personalization you have, if we can have an experience that caters to you the individual, if we know your interests, if we know what you engage with, we can use machine learning and artificial intelligence to make a much, much better experience for you on Instagram.
That was Emily Chang with Instagram CEO Kevin Systrom. Don't miss the full episode of Bloomberg Studio 1.0 this Sunday, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 o'clock back east, right here on Bloomberg Television. Well, coming up is the Chinese tech giant Leko is aggressive enough to push Amazon and Apple out of the way. We're going to talk to the company's R&D head next. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on Bloomberg Radio app, the Radio Plus app, or Bloomberg.com. In the U.S. and Sirius XM on station 119. And in New York, Boston, San Francisco, D.C., we're there on Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Mark Crumpton. You're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's begin with a check of your first word news. Iraqi forces have raised the national flag over a church near Mosul retaken from Islamic State. Iraqi special forces pushed into the predominantly Christian town of Bartella. U.S. Defense Secretary Ash Carter told reporters in Ankara that as a member of the counter-ISIL operations in Iraq, Turkey will play a role.
Turkey, since it neighbors the region of Mosul, has an interest in the ultimate outcome in Mosul. Many other parties do as well. It's a complicated city. And we all understand that. I think the Iraqi government understands that, the Turkish government understands it, and we understand it.
Turkish military operations in northern Iraq have led to increased tensions between the two countries. Donald Trump says he'll be packing his schedule with events until Election Day. At a campaign stop in Fletcher, North Carolina Friday, Trump said he doesn't want to have any regrets.
Our campaign is powered by our love for this country and our love for our fellow citizens. We're in a divided country now. There's going to be love. There's going to be love. It's a campaign about rejecting the cynicism and elitism of our failed political establishment.
Trump said that win, lose, or draw, he will be, quote, happy with himself. Hillary Clinton has a new ad featuring the father of a U.S. Army captain killed in Iraq. Khizr Khan was criticized repeatedly by Donald Trump after he spoke about his son at the Democratic National Convention. Mr. Khan also discussed Trump's proposal to bar Muslims from entering the U.S. At the end of the ad, Khan says, quote, Mr. Trump, would my son have a place in your America? The divisions between the UK and the rest of the European Union have begun to take shape, with Germany warning that Britain faces, quoting here, a difficult path following June's Brexit vote. In Brussels, UK Prime Minister Theresa May addressed the subject following her first EU summit since she assumed power.
We still want to trade freely in goods and services with Europe, and the UK will continue to face similar challenges to our European neighbours. We will continue to share the same values, and so I want a mature, cooperative relationship with our European partners.
May also said that while the UK is leaving the EU, it's not leaving Europe, and that there should be a, quote, give and take with Europe. The Defense Department says the U.S. Navy warship has conducted a freedom of navigation operation in the South China Sea. That's where China and 5 other countries have competing territorial claims. A spokesman says the transit operation was near the Paracel Islands. Vietnam, China, and Taiwan all claim the islands, which are occupied by China. In New York, I'm Mark Crumpton.
This is Bloomberg Technology, and I'm Corey Johnson in for Emily Chang. Well, Chinese tech giant Leko hopes to push into the U.S. market with a number of new devices, including VR goggles, televisions, and even a smart bike. Leko's head of R&D is Rob Chandhook. He's former executive at Qualcomm and a company called Helium. Bloomberg's Selena Wang sat down with Chandhook and asked him why he leave Qualcomm to join a company that most people in the States have never even heard of.
Well, I had actually heard of Leko before, but I heard of it when it was Late TV. And so I knew a little bit about it from Qualcomm. But really what interested me was the ability to actually reach all the way directly to the consumer. A lot of my work over the previous years has been building technology that I hoped would get out to the edge of the consumer devices, like what I did with AllJoyn and some other things. But at Leko, I can actually influence a global market around consumer products, and that was very exciting to me.
This week, Leko unveiled at a very flashy event a whole slew of devices. There's VR goggles, there's smartphones, TVs, smart bikes, electric, maybe an autonomous driving car. We've never seen another Chinese tech company be so aggressive or achieve on such a broad scale in the U.S. What makes you think Leko can pull all of this off?
I think one of the things that's different about Leko is that we're not starting from the hardware-centric approach to it. There aren't little silos building each of these pieces of hardware. We're actually trying to build this content-first ecosystem, and these devices are part of that ecosystem. So when we make a great TV, it's because we want to drive quality in the video and the entertainment experience that our users are getting. When we do it with the car, we want to make sure that as how we use cars changes, we change how we consume media in that setting as well. So I think that content-first approach is going to drive a different way of thinking about the market, which I think will benefit the consumers.
Right, I understand that. Leko is primarily this content business that then built the devices to be able to better access all of that. But we are seeing a lot of U.S. tech giants like Amazon, Apple, Google also trying to build this ecosystem between its content and devices. How is Leko's strategy really so much different than that?
Well, I'm not sure you can say at the very top that it's completely different, right? I mean, we are content first. We are really focused on this iterative user experience development. So our up to you policy of actually soliciting this really live feedback to the point where on a monthly basis we might be adding features to the devices like the phones or the TVs in order to sort of make sure that our customers understand that they can influence how the products work. It's why we spec our devices so high-end, is so we can keep updating the software, so as long as you have that TV, it starts to delight you even more.
Do you think there's room for another ecosystem player in the U.S. market? I mean, it's a very mature, saturated one.
Absolutely. I think if we were just coming in and saying we are just doing one of these verticals, like if we were just trying to do phones, I mean, I've been around that for a long time, and I think that would be tough. But the fact is, we're going to not only build an ecosystem with our own devices, but we're really open about plugging in other people's devices. We recognize that the world is a place of many brands, and we think we can be a platform that other brands can come and also be part of the ecosystem.
The up to you strategy is pretty interesting. I think it really contrasts to, let's say, Apple, which has kind of always told the consumer, we know what you want. It's going to be so great that you're going to want it. How would you compare why the up to you approach will work better?
Well, first of all, I think there's a lot of tech right now that we've sort of got a foundational understanding of what we have to do. We kind of know what entry levels or the basics of smartphones are. We know how app stores should work, and we know how those ecosystems work. But beyond that, there actually are ways that people use their devices in different segments differently. And we think the up to you will allow us to listen to that and help drive that sort of customization over time. Up to me approaches can be good when things are starting, and there's no substitute for a great designer. But we also think some of our users can give us really, really good insight into what the market might really be delighted with.
So Leko, you unveiled very impressive high specs on all of its devices, and I know that you don't actually really profit from those devices. It's the content and services where that's really where the money's going to come from. But do you think that's a sustainable business model for a new company coming to the U.S. that's just getting started on the content side?
I think there are a lot of businesses that are out there right now that are sort of investing in that growth in that way. We see that path to the consumer with the devices as that's our way of acquiring subscribers, right? So we do think that it will actually work as a business model. We've proven that in the Chinese market, and now we're going to bring that to the rest of the world.
That was Leko's R&D head, Rob Chaddock. So now I want to bring in Bloomberg's Selena Wang, whom you just saw on tape. Here she is in real life. All right, so I was confused. What do these guys do?
So at the core, they have this Netflix-style content streaming business, and then they have a bunch of hardware from smartphones, TVs, virtual reality headsets, a smart bike, and electric self-driving car initiative.
So their Netflix and their Schwinn and their Samsung.
So let me take it back a little bit. Yeah, I think they do liken themselves as kind of a young Samsung, although this is not a great time to be comparing yourself to Samsung. Right. But that being said,
doesn't blow up.
They started in 2004 as a content streaming business. They were one of the first to have this paying subscription model back when, a lot of companies were doing pirated content. And then their CEO said, okay, we want to be able to get this content to easily stream across devices. So that's why they pushed into all this hardware. And I think it's important to remember that their content streaming business in China is enormous. They have more than 730 million users.
What?
I know,
so
it's insane.
That's nearly 10 times the size of Netflix.
I mean, it's more than the U.S. population. They have a huge entertainment production unit, so they produce some of their own original content for their web streaming site, kind of how Netflix has House of Cards, Game of Thrones, things like that. So they have a show called Go Princess Go that has insane number of views, and it's about a guy that gets transplanted back to ancient China, but is trapped in the body of a princess. It's interesting.
Wow. Now, is that the thing that they're best at, and how does that translate into making quality electronics?
I mean, they're going to have a lot of struggles, I think, in the U.S. They do have very high-spec products. There's pretty impressive phones and TVs at very low prices. So they make no profit on that. They are actually losing money on every smartphone that they sell. But they feel that...
They're hoping to make it up on volume. That doesn't work.
They're hoping to make it up with their content subscription service. That works okay in China because their content business and services business has already, reached scale. But in the U.S., they don't have a lot of edge over a lot of the
subsidized hardware that is fed Leko content, so you get the hardware cheaper. Not unlike the cable industry, right, where you get a cable box that probably costs the cable company $600 to $1,000, but they know that's going to keep you using the cable system.
Exactly. I mean, to start out with, they're making it an open platform, so they are working with a lot of different streaming sites and say, you buy our hardware, we'll give you this subscription service for free. And then, in coming months, they're going to assess how they're going to actually monetize that and charge consumers. But they've also set up a huge entertainment unit in LA. They hired an old Paramount president, and he's working on making original content for U.S. audiences.
Wait, another original? So you got HBO, Showtime, Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, all of the networks, and now Leko in Hollywood?
Yeah, I mean, do you know that Great Wall movie coming out with Matt Damon?
Yep.
They are the ones behind that. So they not only want to, in the U.S., produce these blockbuster English-speaking movies, they also want to make TV shows.
Really interesting. So basically, everyone in Hollywood, selling content seems like it's a business to be in Hollywood right now.
It does, and you're seeing more Chinese money in Hollywood. I mean, look at Alibaba Pictures. They're behind a lot of big blockbuster movies too now, and Leko is just going to be continuing to be a big force in Hollywood.
Any notion of how big the company is revenue-wise or anything like that?
I mean, let me just break it down a little bit. Yeah. So they have kind of three big entities all tied together by the CEO who has a big stake in all of them. So there's Leko, which is a publicly traded content streaming part. There's Leko Global Group, which is the massive slew of like the Lei VR, Lei Mobile, Lei TV, Leko, all those different companies. That they want to take that company public in the U.S. That's another entity. And then they own one of the largest ride-hailing companies in China, Idao, and they also YT, the CEO, is a co-founder of Faraday Futures, an electric driving initiatives in LA, and they have a big plant in Las Vegas.
Not in light of ambition, Leko. I'm glad you brought this to us. Selena Wang, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Corey.
All right. It's Bloomberg's Selena Wang. All right, coming up, a story we've been following. New York State has enacted one of the toughest restrictions on Airbnb in the country. It was already illegal to rent out apartments for less than 30 days in New York, but this new measure, signed by Governor Andrew Cuomo today, adds a $7,500 fine to people advertising these illegal rentals. Backers of the measure argue that Airbnb hurts existing hotels and takes residential units off the already expensive housing market in New York City. On the other hand, Airbnb says it helps people make money when they're out of town. Airbnb filed a lawsuit against New York immediately after the bill was signed into law. Still to come, the Chinese company dominating the drone market sets its sights in Silicon Valley. We're going to look at DJI's expansion plans next. And this week on Bloomberg Television, we're going to bring you some of the best interviews of the week, including a lineup of power VCs from the Vanity Fair New Establishment Summit. Our conversations with Bill Gurley, Shervin Pershivar, and Chamath Palihapitiya, among others. Yes, I said Chamath Palihapitiya. That's how it takes practice, but it can be done. That's on the best of Bloomberg Technology. This Saturday, this is Bloomberg. Walmart is investing $50 million in New Dada, China's largest online grocery and logistics company. The move is an extension of Walmart's pact with JD.com, China's #2 e-commerce site. New Dada has more than 25 million registered customers, delivering to more than 300 cities. The world's largest consumer drone maker is setting up shop in Silicon Valley. DJI is the company, opening a Silicon Valley R&D center to recruit engineering talent. Comes at a critical time. GoPro trying to crack DJI's market dominance with its Karma drone. Joining us right now, DJI's Vice President of Engineering Systems and Applications, Darren Liccardo. So this thing is a really interesting device. Is it pedantic to compare it to the nascent GoPro device?
Possibly. We think the Karma Pro, which is what you're talking about, is or the Mavic Pro is going to be what's in people's stockings for this holiday season. It's finally something that's small enough, that's portable enough to really take anywhere.
And that portability, well, what do people want when they want a drone?
So for consumer, they really want something that's accessible, easy to use, something that you can take with you on a day hike, still have room for everything else you would normally take with you, and not sort of fill up an entire backpack.
A backpack.
Do you want to see one?
I do want to see one.
All right, let's
break
pull
it out.
So this is my day hike pack. I'm actually going to go hiking tomorrow. So this
put
is
it up here. Let's see this thing.
What I hike with, and it's got my my jacket in here. Got my water bottle, and oh look.
And a bucket of beer. That's it?
A Mavic Pro.
Wait, so I actually tweeted a picture out of this when it first came out. This is the drone?
That's the whole thing.
It's got a camera already built into it.
It's actually got 5 cameras.
Let you open it up so I can see.
Yeah, absolutely. So it actually has 5 cameras.
That's
of course,
tiny.
It has,
and what about the controller?
So the controller, you can actually control it directly from your phone if you don't want to carry a controller with you. But we also have a really cool new little controller. So there's the whole thing folded out, ready to fly. You can control it from your phone. You have a little bit of a limited range just because of Wi-Fi. But then if you want to go a little bit further,
too. It's interesting.
You
in
can,
pictures, it didn't look as tough as it seems to be.
Yeah, no, it's feels very high quality.
Looks like a little Xbox controller or something.
New kind of game pad style controller, nice and portable. Still gives you that stick feel, for those more traditional RC Pilot types.
So compare this to the competition. Let's compare this to, we've got some stats actually comparing it to the GoPro device.
Yeah.
Is the GoPro, and I'm going to ask again, is the GoPro device the one thing we should be comparing it to?
No, not really. I mean, this is everything that we have in a Phantom 4, but in a smaller package, actually more capability than that. We've added.
Lighter than the GoPro device. It's a lot smaller when it folds up. It flies faster and for longer.
Yep, and we've got 5 cameras on here. So we do collision avoidance going forward and looking down. So it really helps you prevent you from hitting stuff, makes it super easy to use, and lets you focus on the creative aspect of collecting the photos and videos that you want to take.
Who buys these things?
So it's consumer prosumer, right? I think what we're seeing in the industry is smaller, lighter is better for consumer. But interestingly enough, one of the things we're here in Silicon Valley to do is also explore industrial and commercial applications. And we're getting a ton of interest on this platform, but also on many of our larger vehicles. We build a set of very large, capable payload lifting vehicles.
Payload lifting? What kind of payload?
So we can do 6 kilograms on our Matrice 600. That's a pretty sizable payload. That means you can take basically a broadcast quality camera if you like. You can also put sort of any other hardware you want, specialized sensor hardware, LiDAR if you want to do inspection, mapping, a ton of interesting applications where normally they've either been addressed with very expensive sort of manned aviation applications or haven't been possible at all.
And what are we talking about in terms of cost?
For which? Mavic?
For this, yeah.
Yeah, so Mavic Pro, we've got a few different packages. Under $1,000, you can get Mavic Pro and a controller. You can go a little bit further, get an extra battery for $1,100-1,200. And
is $1,000 kind of the sweet spot there, staying under 1,000?
Kind of the sweet spot. Clearly there's a range of demand. I think even lower priced. In fact, if you don't want the controller and you just are happy flying with just your phone, then you can just get the drone itself for $799.
It's an interesting business. The professional market is kind of the X factor here. But how big is this the the market for just the novices, people want to fool around with these things and take pictures?
Yeah, so that's the market that's exploded this last year or two. And
define exploded.
I mean, exploded is I mean, we don't talk about specific numbers, but massive, really a massive market that's exploded around
like
consumer.
Across all companies in this market, what are you talking about? 5 million units sold?
I mean, I'm sure at least across all products.
Because in technology, we talk about exploded, we think about Samsung Note 7s, and I don't want you to go that way.
That's right.
But, all right, so we're talking about a market right now about 5 million people, but the professional market presumably is more elastic, both in terms of size, but also in terms of, or maybe not in size, but in terms of how much they're willing to spend.
That's right. But what's interesting about the professional market is there's a ton of interesting value on top of the vehicle, and so we think the drone is really the platform that enables these kinds of industrial applications. So that value stack, there's a lot more money to be had per vehicle in terms of addressing applications like
So does
inspection.
DJI have ambitions in terms of sort of data collection, analytics, all the software that will go with that kind of thing?
Absolutely. So we build a software development kit that allows you to treat this vehicle as a platform. Really, we want to enable all of these third-party applications and all of these professional applications by allowing people to take our vehicle and build their stack on top of it.
Last question, if you get one thing regulatory-wise, if you get your dream, one thing to be changed or in the regulatory environment for drones, what would it be?
So we're working hard on that. So we have Part 107 rules, which allow you to do commercial operations line of sight now during the day.
In other words, as long as you can see the drone, you can do it.
That's right, exactly. We're really looking for beyond line of sight operation. We think once you get there, you allow complete mission autonomy, and that's where you get the labor savings.
So a farmer can check all of his fields, not just one, and things like that.
Exactly.
A pipeline can be explored.
While he's sitting inside drinking a cup of coffee.
Really cool stuff. This thing is cool. Johnson girls might have something in their Christmas stocking of those lines. All right, cool. Darren Liccardo, Vice President of Systems and Application Engineering at DJI. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
On a Monday on Bloomberg, we're going to catch up with the always colorful T-Mobile CEO John Legere, so-called uncarrier, reporting earnings before the bell. We're going to bring you the details. He'll surely be tweeting those, maybe with emojis. I can only hope. The coach certainly hopes so. All right, the International Space Station is getting 3 new tenants. We're going to bring you up to speed on the latest crew and a possible explosion on Mars. That's next. This is Bloomberg.
How do you walk that line when you're in the middle of a crisis situation?
It's really all about enabling people. Technology needs to serve everyone.
But at the end of the day, it's all about emotional decision.
I think there's huge innovation left in music.
The hallmark of a truly great leader is that great is never great enough.
500 million users is a big feat. It's got a life of its own. Don't get in its way and make it awesome.
Well, in this edition of Out of This World, scientists say the European Space Agency probe meant for Mars hit the right spot, but at the wrong speed. It likely exploded after a crash landing. Photos taken by NASA satellite show a black spot in the area where the lander was meant to touch down on Wednesday. It's supposed to test technology for a more ambitious European Mars landing in 2020. On the bright side, the spacecraft that sent the probe to Mars is still successfully orbiting the planet. Will analyze the Martian atmosphere in a search for evidence of life. Staying in space, the latest team of astronauts from Russia and the U.S. have arrived at the International Space Station after a 2-day voyage. The docking process went smoothly on Friday morning after a lengthy process of opening up the hatches and exiting the three-person crew, the existing three-person crew, welcoming the new teammates. Now, this brings the total crew aboard the ISS to 6. Won't be that crowded for long, though. In about a week, 3 of the astronauts head home, and NASA's Shane Kimbrough takes over as a station commander. All right, that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Don't miss our conversation with Instagram CEO Kevin Systrom this weekend at the first episode of Season 5 of the long-form series Studio 1.0. That's Bloomberg Studio 1.0, and that's at noon New York time, 9 a.m. San Francisco this Sunday. Remember, all episodes of Bloomberg Technology live streaming on Twitter. Check out the Twitter. Check out @BloombergTech TV on weekends, 6 p.m. New York, 3 p.m. in San Francisco. That's all for now from San Francisco. I'm Corey Johnson, and this is Bloomberg.